My name is Medina, and I'm a public affairs specialist here. Welcome to our town hall for the Master Plan 2022. Tonight's presenter will be Mr. McHenrick, the Executive Director of the Draft Master Plan and SERS. Following his presentation, we'll open the floor for questions and answers. We're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome Mr. McHenrick to the podium. Excuse me, slight correction. We're going to begin with opening remarks from our facility director, Dr. Braverman, and then Mr. McHenrick will come on. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I didn't want to be confused with Mr. McHenrick, so I grew a beard a little bit. But no, just kidding there. Thank you, Medina. Appreciate you getting us started with that. So this is the third of four large community scheduled engagements to take a look at the master plan and make recommendations as we move along towards a revision, Master Plan 2022. We also will or have sent out invitations to community groups, veteran service organizations, and others, and Mac will detail that again for individual briefings of those groups and discussion the week following October 18th after the draft master plan is publicized, if you will, and then a 60-day Federal Registry comment. So we'll take care of that moving forward. Today's topic is looking at the various zones in play and what kind of options there are within those zones. Mr. McHenrick will also talk about some of the various options that we have in play for continuing to build on the town hall concept or community town concept, if you will, based on the various options from a legal perspective. The one thing before I turn over to Mr. McHenrick that I want to do that I always try to take advantage of when speaking in any kind of public forum is to talk about COVID vaccination. We're fortunate here in Los Angeles and here at our VA in that we're not seeing a high level of transmission. We're now at the sustained level of transmission instead of high transmission. That's a good thing, even with, especially with the Delta variant out there. But vaccines continue to be especially effective in preventing hospitalization and death. And that's the important thing. We now have approval for booster shots for the Pfizer vaccine. That is for veterans, their spouses, and their caregivers who have received the first two shots of the Pfizer vaccine at least 6 months ago are eligible to receive a booster vaccine. And all of our facilities are providing that vaccination. For those who are 64 years and older, it's a 65 and older, it's recommended by the CDC that people should get a booster vaccine. For individuals 50 to 64 years old who have underlying medical conditions, they are also recommended as a should to get vaccinations. For individuals 18 to 49 who have occupational considerations or have underlying medical conditions, then it's a may recommendation for vaccination. And for those 50 to 64 who don't have underlying medical conditions but may have occupational exposure, that's also a may recommendation. So we have these available now, and we want to encourage not only the booster shots for those who should get them, but first and second vaccine for everyone, because everyone should get them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McHenrick. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. This is our third series, and I believe our fifth town hall, excuse me, specifically on Master Plan 2022. So moving forward, we'll get right into the slides. Take a second here to bring them up to clear the screen. All right. Next slide. Just a quick agenda. Introduction here, go over the quick overview, master plan project, what we're doing, a recap of our prior town halls, the process, progress to date. We'll talk about the Federal Register process. That's of interest to folks, and that's where we put the master plan 2022 draft out for review and comment, so we can adjust it from there. Then we'll go over some alternatives that we see and want folks to provide feedback on as we move forward. We review the feedback every day or two to see what's in the queue and what's out there, and we bring that in and we include that. And we've been doing that all along so that we just don't have the input on the master plan that comes out with the Federal Register, but we also have input on pieces along the way. So we'll go over some decision points in some areas. We're looking for specific input in each of these zones: the healthcare zone, long-term care and auxiliary service zone, the veteran housing and community service zone, as well as the veteran community interaction engagement zone. And then we'll talk about next steps, how you can provide feedback. Okay, next slide. This is a slide we've used consistently. It talks about our draft master plan, the commitment for 1,200 units of permanent supportive housing. 54 units currently available and occupied. We have another 180 online that'll come online next year. And then the balance of the 1,200 units continue to come online over a period of time. And then we're committed to the updating the draft master plan process, and that's going to be difficult to read if we can't move that box. I know it's on the slide. Okay, and then we want to include the fact that we have the OIG audits that occur periodically, and that's in the draft master plan and West LA Leasing Act. The fact that we do need some oversight, and we do this revision process, and the West LA Leasing Act formalized the audits and the Veteran Community Oversight and Engagement Board, the VCOEB, which had an open meeting to the public yesterday, and we gave them a briefing, and we briefed them previously, and we'll go over some of that in a little bit. So we're good. Next slide. Okay, just a quick review of what we've done, a recap here. We had 4 town halls, 2 sessions previously on the August 19th and then September 9th. Went over those issues there, the service platform for homeless, what we're trying to do, the land use reforms, environmental, historic due diligence, infrastructure, discussed current plans, visions, and we actually went over some of the constraints and limitations that we saw in the different zones and different areas. And then we walked through some of the feedback that we received, how much and how we set up the process to get feedback. Next slide. So we're developing the master plan, which the master plan itself calls for a update every 3 years, and another area calls for 3 to 5 years. So we're doing that update. These are the tasks that we see as working through this. You can see the little Gantt chart to the right there on the bottom. As you look across and you see that Gantt chart, it extends all the way out into January now. And it's really that Federal Register process, task number 5, that we're putting the draft out there, and the Secretary has determined that instead of a 30-day standard Federal Register comment period, he would like a 60-day comment period. And he acknowledges that different entities had called for a longer comment period. So the master plan draft, the master plan 2022 draft, will be out for 60 days, and we'll go over that in a later slide, but you can see at the bottom there in yellow that it'll be from October 8th through December 6th. That's the actual open period. it'll close on the 7th. It'll open on the 8th and close on the 7th. But you can see the different tasks, and we're moving through those. Several of them are obviously conducted simultaneously. Next slide. So here we are, we're focused on the Federal Register. We know that we have that deadline coming up on the 8th of October to get that draft out for comment. So we've worked through the different sections. Previously, I had shared some information about crosswalking the areas in the master plan, and we'll show you where to go and see those previous documents and where the slides are available. But had crosswalked the sections of the draft master plan and showed where that would be discussed or included in some of the documents that exist already. And we'll do a crosswalk eventually to exactly where it'll be in the master plan 2022 draft. But I don't expect things to move from section to section significantly. I expect the information to track with those sections. Next slide. Okay. So here's the meat of what I want to talk about tonight and really walk through the zones and show some options and decision points and some of the work that's been done for a period of time now. Some we've been talking about for years, needing to move things, get things relocated, get money in our budget to put the recycling center somewhere else, things like that. So wanting to walk through and share some of that and some of the decision points, and you're able to comment on these on the website that I'll give you later, as well as when the Federal Register comes out, you can use the Federal Register process to comment on the Draft Master Plan 2022, and you can comment on any of these areas that you see that might spur some thought. Next slide. Okay. So 2 slides here, really looking at healthcare overall, just looking at the existing conditions that photograph on the left. And what we're focused on is zone 1, our healthcare zone on the bottom of the campus below Wilshire Boulevard. At the top there, you see Wilshire Boulevard. You can see the image on the left-hand side. As you look to the right, you can see what the draft master plan in 2016 contemplated. It contemplated numerous buildings off to the left of that gray box there on the top right quadrant that is really building 4 or building 500. That's the main medical center. But you can see all the other service buildings on the left-hand side. You can see a building to the right on the bottom. So lots of activity was contemplated in the south in the draft master plan, but we know the Office of Construction and Facility Management out of headquarters really drives redevelopment of medical services and medical centers and the medical needs. So they have the lead, and they have had the lead. We've worked numerous projects. We'll go to the next slide. And we do have some refined concepts. You can see where listed on the right-hand side, the third item down is new hospital. That's what we call the bed tower. So building 500 would be reduced to lower floors eventually. So it would be seismic compliant. I think the biggest thing is the elevators wouldn't align properly during a significant seismic activity. It's not that the floors or anything drastic would happen, but it might misalign enough, and it might not register well with the lines that run through it for the oxygen and the other things we use in a hospital. So a new tower is contemplated just south of that, a central utility power plant addressing all the healthcare needs for utilities on the south campus, a boiler plant we'll talk about in a later slide where steam is important to the hospital and how we operate, wanting to move the boiler plant down to the area where it's most needed, cut down on the movement of steam across the campus. We've already got a central kitchen underway down here, vacating a building on the north campus that's needed for the enhanced use lease processes. So getting the kitchen down there, we're at 35 to 38% were the last numbers I heard on completion. You can go by there and you can see all the floors being constructed and the steel is up and a lot of stuff happening there. Contemplating a parking structure in the south corner that's already in design, I believe, by Metro. That's part of a commitment of Metro. They have the easement for the Metro station on the north there. You can see the top right Metro station. We know that'll take a number of years to build, 26, 27 is when we expect to see significant completion in there and utilization. But they will provide a parking garage in that area that's denoted in the bottom left quadrant by that red square. And then just coming around the other side, different concepts of where the outpatient clinic might be if it's outside of the new hospital instead of it being in the hospital in building 500. It's on the first floor with a lot of outpatient services there. But now looking to move those outpatient clinics into a separate building, a consolidated research building, so we can vacate a number of buildings on the North Campus for EUL activities. So we're trying to consolidate that to the South Campus. And then as we look at it, we know we will probably need another parking structure because we're taking up a lot of the surface parking and we're consolidating more things to the south like research and kitchen. So wanting to add a second parking structure. So working all those things. You can see a couple other things just annotated on the diagram. But that's what we're thinking about in Master Plan 2022. And of course, these are conceptual and we've worked some of the diagramming, but the Office of Construction Facility Management has the lead on this. And of course, we have to get in line with all the other VA medical centers in our vision, as well as across the nation as to who gets funding and how fast the funding flows to do all these projects. So certainly a long-term vision on the South Campus. Next slide. So this leads into Zone 2, and this is one of 3 slides in Zone 2. You have to pay attention here. I don't want to lose anybody, but the long-term healthcare and the really transitional housing is shown in the meat of this. You have some long-term housing, permanent supportive housing in that top left quadrant as you look at some of that area. But mainly in the center there in that what looks like an arrow going northeast. You have a lot of healthcare. We have the domiciliary in there. We have our community living centers, our CLCs. We have different activity going on there with transitional housing in that area as well. So just showing you the existing conditions, what it looks like today. Master Plan, 2016 draft master plan had a vision that looked something like this. We'll go to the next slide. So here's Master Plan 2022, a draft of what it might look like. You can see reaching up to the top there, building 212 would be repurposed for mental health purposes. So we would create beds in there. I'm forgetting the number. I thought it might have been 54 or somewhere thereabouts, higher maybe. Okay. Don't have that number in my head, but obviously repurposing that for medical purposes, mental health beds. Coming down there between the 2 domiciliary buildings, 214 and 217, the DOM healing guarding. So making that area more hospitable and usable by the veterans, having the ability to do outdoor classes, ability to have a walking path, discussions about adding a separate area for female veterans only so that they have a somewhat segregated private area. All those are good things. We know the Veteran Family Wellness Center is in building 220, so it's expanding and capitalizing on that. We come around, we have our regional or VA district office for our Office of General Counsel. And then the Wadsworth Theater is there. One of the questions might be, how do we use the Wadsworth Theater going forward? Obviously, you could renovate it and show movies, but we could do a lot more with that building. It's a beautiful big old building on the inside, has some damage to it and needs to be restored, but it has to be brought up to life fire safety code. So we have to work on that. Some design there on the bottom of expanding the usable and visible grand lawn, bringing that all the way back around behind the chapel and cutting the size of the parking lot down that's outside of building 218. Building 218 would remain administrative and need some rehab in it. Coming up, opening up some area, having a parade ground or the old parade ground area that kind of connected the center of the campus all the way up to one of the administrative buildings in the north there, which would then, that building in the north and the red hash marks, that building area would be back to the EUL, but opening up that area so you have a line of sight from Wadsworth Theater all the way north to the central building. And we'll talk about that building in a later slides and go over different visions of that. Looking at community living center areas there on the right, and then some shared dining spaces throughout the campus that we already have some of those dining facilities utilized now, but only by really residents of that area. So talking about how we use those and how other residents might use them. Okay, that's what's contemplated in Master Plan 2022 draft. Next slide. Okay. Now we're into Zone 2. And Zone 2 gets a little complicated. There's a left and a right-hand side to Zone 2. So once again, trying not to get too confused here. But let's back up for a slide for a second. I forgot a question I wanted to ask. When we look at this, and I talked about the Wadsworth Chapel on the south and the Wadsworth Theater, I didn't really talk about the chapel, but the chapel is there on the south for a spiritual center. I wanted to mention that because we've already got that started. The group already has a revocable license and they're already moving forward doing more assessments. Assessments were done years ago and then it paused for a period of time. And now that we're back into doing leasing opportunities to upgrade and restore these, it's also a spiritual center to provide services. And that's a veteran-centric service piece of it, not just the restoration. But I want to pause for a second and say in this area, we want to take a good look at what amenities and services we would like to see in here, not just the things that are contemplated here by those that are working on the Master Plan 2022 draft and pulling information from the draft master plan, but what is it we think we would need if it were to look something like this with these entities and the land like this? What is it we would use this area for? The same thing with the first few slides I showed about the South Campus. Would we want to see food or childcare or other things, the services and amenities on the South Campus, and what would be the benefit of those and where might we put those? So, you know, opening it up for all kinds of comments and thoughts here as we move forward. Next slide. Okay, this was Zone 2, started to get into this. So looking at Zone 2 here, the Zone 2 has two looks at it. The first look here is to the right, which is up against the 405 freeway on the right-hand side. And this is really the industrial area. And we want to talk about what might be done in this area, but acknowledging that VA doesn't have the capacity or capability to uplift and move the industrial resources out of here that support GLA operations, all of the healthcare operations and administrative operations. We have engineering in here, we have transportation, we have laundry. Currently we have steam, but we're moving that out of there, the steam plant. But we have emergency services, we have some VAPD services in this area, our locksmith, all those different things. There is the oil lease area. You can see it on the right towards the top quadrant. It's in a green area right now, but that's really where the oil lease area is. So talking about what are we going to do with these warehouses, with this laundry service, with all these other support services. So go to the next slide and we'll look at that. So in this area, you can see the laundry up in the top left there. That really doesn't change. There's no opportunity to move that anywhere else, nor any need to. What we can do is we come down on the left there, we envision building 224, a little bit of repurposing by moving VA police, some of their services in there and having it consolidated with engineering. I believe they already have some police services in there, but wanting to look to move some engineering there to move it out of the way from some other areas. Building 33, we're already using that as a little bit of an information center, but it's a historic type. So we're going to continue to use that as really a historical type of entity. Contemplating a 2-level parking garage because we're taking up some of the surface parking in this area. So then we'll need to, as we add additional consolidated services in this area and add a few more buildings I'll talk about in a minute, you'll see the need for some parking in this area. Contemplating a repurpose of building 295, which is the old steam plant. Once we're out of there, rehabbing that and turning it into a little bit of an art gallery event space. It's a beautiful old building. It'll take some work and some money to rehab that. So that's one of those hopeful things. Looking at buildings 44 and 46, coming down on the left-hand side, trying to get some job training opportunities in there. That was contemplated in the enterprise zone concept. Acknowledging that, trying to move some of those services out of there into some other areas. Some other utilities, electrical transformer, no issue. There was a thought of if we had the possibility of adding another building in the bottom right corner, there might be a footprint big enough for it. Of course, that would have to be scoped out and funded as future development that could be used in some type of activity related to either job training or partnerships with community industry or other things. Coming back up on the right side, those 3 red boxes you see, areas where we think we can drop footprints for. We have to replace a maintenance building that's all the way up towards the golf course, building 259, a replacement. To move out of the way of the columbariums, there's discussion about moving the recycling facility so it's not surrounded by columbarium activity, and moving the recycling facility down to this area. And then building 233, our hazmat storage area that sits on a parking lot in the corner of a parking lot. That parking lot is scheduled to be turned over to the EULs. So we'll have to move that. We're trying to make space for that down there as well, a replacement building. All we do is package up hazmat from the hospital predominantly, and that gets packaged and shipped out for disposal. Every hospital has that hazmat storage and packaging for shipment. But then there's our transportation that exists. There's a contemplated storage warehouse, a new storage warehouse. And then in building 222, we do have emergency services already. You can see the oil and gas lease area there. And then you can see our 297 warehouse or surge space up there on the right. And then just labeled further north on the other side of that road is the columbarium, and phase 1 is already there. So looking at this and thinking about it, is it the best location for vocational job training? And we'll talk about some of the job training and some of the other opportunities in some future slides. And what specific kinds of vocational training are most important to veterans that the veterans are interested in, and we can pursue how that partnership might work, and if entities are agreeable to do revocable licenses to provide those services, training, and linkage on this campus. Okay, next slide. All right, so talked about this being just a little complicated. So coming back around in this area, showing alternative B. So this shows a hazmat storage building further down on the right-hand corner, shows the other 2 buildings there. Nothing significantly different, but just moving some things around a little bit. A master plan 2022 draft. On the right-hand side, another diagram, near-term, long-term projects. So the long-term project there would be to potentially repurpose some of the land that was leased over to the oil and gas years ago. Their operation is somewhat stagnant on a portion of the land, and we'd like to engage with them to see over a long-term process we can get some of that land back and then repurpose some of that land and use it for something else, maybe an exchange or something where we could have some other type of activity there in that area. Could be an option. Okay, next slide. So here's three slides looking at zone 3 again, but now we're back to the left. And previously we were on the right-hand side in the industrial area up against 405. Now we're back on the left, and you see the arrow to the lower part of the screen that I had talked about before, in that area that might lead all the way up from the theater going all the way north. And in this area, you can see the existing conditions, what we have, those two large parking lots that we've talked about, and repurposing those. Draft master plan had a vision that looked something like this, was their vision. Going to the next slide. So this is the principal developer's proposed community plan town center. Just get my notes aligned here. So in this area, I want to point out three things that are going to be consistent: the clock tower, the town green, and then the town hall. So folks get confused between town center, town hall, and what's going on. And it's really trying to get with some consistent terms here as we move into Master Plan 2022, and really breaking out things to a little more definitive level. So starting at the top and just walking our way down some of the concepts here, you can follow the arrows on the screen, and these will be posted online so you can download them or view them in any fashion you choose. But the Living Museum for Veterans, Building 199, so that's contemplated in that area between a few EULs, 407, 408. The 66 trolley depot, transit plaza, multimodal shuttle stop, bike facilities, mini mobile share station. So really getting into some transit opportunities in that area and making use of the old trolley station, which is one of our 5 historic buildings on campus. So preserving that as well. Creating a main street there in the middle from left to right, really making the best use of that avenue, moving across the campus and connecting to the transportation hub. And then looking at that red square in the bottom right there. So all of the red hash mark areas are EULs, permanent supportive housing, but really trying to work this concept in Building 13 of a town hall co-located with housing. So a grand hall event space, a welcome center, canteen, Patriot store, fitness center, and administrative functions. So we're challenged there, but we're challenging the system, and that's part of what we're doing in this process. We didn't get this far by challenging the system, and I appreciate everyone that's been, a part of that group that has really pushed VA and pushed government and pushed GLA to be more engaged, better, and to challenge what the rules and regulations are and see if we can get them changed. We have to manage by them and live with them today, but if we can get them changed in the future, they can benefit us. So part of our challenge is in Building 13 to make all that happen with shared use space. We really have to talk about how we understand EULs to have not only housing space, but the opportunity to have other supportive services in the same building. Not all of the space needs to be housing, because the veterans want and need these other services and wraparound things to help sustain them in their living environment and in the housing that they have. So working, a couple different avenues here. One is shared use space. So can we get approval through legislative means or policies to allow us to have EULs with significant shared use space to do these other things? Especially where it's not just 1 or 2 buildings that we're talking about. We're talking about near 30 buildings here eventually over, almost 30 years that will be EULs, that will be opportunities for veterans to live in, far north of 20 buildings. So really looking at that, and how do we do that? Do we do that through some kind of policy or legislative change that allows us to get that done? Do we put services in nearby areas where they're in the revocable license area, where they can have a revocable license to do it? Do we do it through some kind of lease or other type of agreement if it's allowable? We really have to look at all the opportunities to do this partnering with community entities, or even bringing in our veteran canteen service and saying, how much can you do and where can you do it if VA maintains a building, or if we could do shared use, if we maintain a certain amount of space in a building. So really working through all those options. They contemplate a restaurant on the green in building 306, and then all the different things, food providers, personal services, neighborhood or oriented retail, library, all those different things. So just looking at this and wanting people to think, what alternatives would you prefer? Alternative A or B, or this or the other? Looking at these slides, if you go through them, what options do you like? Next slide. Okay. You see the same things here, clock tower, town green in those areas. You see a town hall, veterans activity center, great room, fitness center, recreation room, library, theater, music, craft arts, barber shop, a micromobility transportation center, roughly in the same area. Historic barracks, coffee house, gift shop, moving into that area. One of our other historic buildings, building 199. A bit of an exchange or market or grocery there to the west or just left of building 113. 113 being multi-use again, EUL, as well as some other services, legal services, nonprofits, welcome center, education, training, veterans career center, administrative functions. So now we're talking about bringing some of that education, some of that job skills training back into the central of this area. It's right across from where we would have it in that other area, the industrial area on the right-hand side. So it's not too far. It's in the same area of campus, but it's more co-located with the central activities and housing. Canteen, culinary training center, restored National Registry Trolley Depot, campus directory info center, how to drive that, making that area open and really the central landing area of the campus for the community. Okay, this is an alternative. Next slide. I'm going to go a little faster here because I want to have time for folks to make comments and ask questions. So this is zone 4, the outer rim that we really haven't developed because we're so hyper-focused on the housing and building the community and then adding all the wraparound services and other amenities. Existing conditions, you can see the North Campus, you can see those areas. The draft master plan had contemplated a road that would go to the left over top of the arroyo. We know the arroyo is that deep ravine that runs across there. And we do have some hazmat areas there from years ago. So we have to be careful of what we develop in that area and where and how we develop it. So you could see some connectivity to that northwest side. Next slide. So this plan, Master Plan 2022 draft, has some of those same things. It shows you what's out there at this point, contemplates an exchange, veteran operated retail on the northwest side. Coming down, it shows the Veterans Barrington Park, the dog park. It shows a RV park where we could probably carve out a path and an area for RVs. Veterans could come and spend a period of time with the RVs. But it also shows that arroyo or that ravine area going up. It shows in that red square, a recreation and therapy center contemplated. It has the golf clubhouse, the Japanese garden. It shows some of the things that are managed by UCLA right now under their lease and that we have access to, the aquatic center, the sports fields, the track and football field, the tennis coming down there. And then in the bottom right to the east of building 209 in that area we're developing right now is contemplated a agricultural harvest and job training area tied to agriculture and a therapy garden. So carving that out of the area that's not currently used. Okay, so just looking at this area and some of the things going on here, wanting to say the same questions, what would you like to see in these areas? What's most important to the veterans? Alternatives for the Barrington Park or the dog park area. Is the RV park a good addition to the campus? Maybe, maybe not. Next slide. All right. Wrapping up here with a handful of slides, I'll move through them pretty quickly. We've already had the initial kickoff town hall on the 19th of August. We did a series of town halls on the 9th. We've briefed the VCOEB. We briefed their subcommittee that works with the master plan. And then we specifically briefed in their open town hall yesterday. So a couple of engagements there. We're doing the engagement today. We're going to do another engagement later on in October. We'll probably lock that in within the next week or two. What's really driving some of that is the fact that we have the opportunity to do some forums with some of these groups that Dr. Braverman talked about, and we have 30 slots to engage with different entities or groups that would like to receive a briefing. It would be about a 1.5 hour time slot. It's really a forum because it's a discussion over what that master plan is that will be posted on the Federal Register, and the ability to talk and provide some answers and really discuss what people see, or if they have any specific things they'd like us to get back to them on. So an opportunity for engagements there. You can see working through the process and really trying to get our document after we receive input from the Federal Register, and going through that input, getting it up through the concurrence process on the 3rd of January. Next slide. Okay, so we talked about providing input. You don't have to wait for the Federal Register. I want to show you where to go and get some of this information. If you go to westladraftmasterplan.org, you hit that button to the right there. It's not really that big. It looks like the other ones, but it says Master Plan 2022. You click on that. You're able to see this drop down that provides you a good 15-page or so Master Plan 2022 informational concept paper, which is a good paper to get some background on the master plan, how we got where we're at today and what we're trying to do. You can see the draft community plan from the principal developer who we've engaged and is really driving the development forward, and we want to provide feedback to them. That's really what this whole process is about. And then town hall presented materials, things that we've presented at these master plan 2022 town halls. So you can pull those materials and look at that. We'll go to the next slide. We're almost done. If you go to that same page, but go all the way to the bottom and you click on this big bar that says Master Plan 2022 Feedback Questionnaire, you can then go in and provide feedback on more than a dozen areas that we've outlined that you want to comment on, and that helps us categorize the comments. You can go in as many times as you'd like. You can fill out the bottom portion of the comment survey with the questionnaire that says, I like this, I don't like that. You can free form it, and you can even attach documents to provide feedback. So you can see what we've done and shared thus far, and you can provide us feedback in any way, any format you'd like in that questionnaire by attaching anything you'd like. And then you go back and submit it and you're good to go. Next slide. All right, that's it. So that's the question slide that says, I've presented a lot of material, hyper speed. You're able to get the slides. We'll have those up in a day or so. We usually have them up the next day. And we capture all the questions. What I didn't go over here was how much feedback we've had. I think we've had over, I forget, it was in my notes, how many people have participated at this point. So almost 80 different individuals have provided input, and we've got dozens and dozens of comments in already that we've worked through from different areas, even from some of these town halls. We've taken that feedback, categorized it, determined, who it's from, so we know that it's an independent individual comment, and then we work that into the process too. So we're trying to work input as we go, as well as receive input through the Federal Register process. So trying to be as holistic as we can. All right, open for questions. going to stand here for the next 36 minutes until I receive a question. Just wait one more minute. Hey, Zavin, while we're waiting, where did they go to see my video? Where's my video? Okay, so if you go to the draft master plan, West LA Draft Master Plan.org website, and under what area? The news area in the bottom left corner? So there's a tab called News, and we're going to put it in the chat, and you can go there and you can see a virtual tour of the campus. Okay. You don't have to watch the whole tour. It's about 18 minutes, but it goes site by site and talks about what's there and where we want to go. Okay. Yeah. So we're putting a link in there for you. Okay. We'll let that rest for a minute while we close out this meeting, absent any questions. I'll turn it over to Medina.
Thank you, Mac. So it doesn't appear that we have any questions at this time, but please feel free to send any questions that pop up at the conclusion of this meeting to the Public Affairs Group. That email address is vhaglapublicaffairs@va.gov. With that, we'll conclude today's town hall. Thank you for joining us.